One of the best parts of this community is that people are actually making things. And today, 3 members of my Discord community trusted me with their work. Here's my honest take on 3 comics from Discord. Okay, so first up we've got Clance and their comic Toco. So the first thing that I want to say about this comic is that on the inside page here, you've got this Christian reference. Now, I'm not saying get rid of it or anything like that. I'm saying get rid of this first line, the skip if you don't care line, because they haven't even read the comic yet and you're being somewhat confrontational immediately. I'm an atheist and that made me feel somewhat unwelcome to read your comic. So I would get rid of it. Keep everything else absolutely fine. You shouldn't, hide away from your beliefs or anything like that, but take out that first line. Let your audience decide whether they care about that or not. Now, onto the comic itself. The main takeaway that I want you to consider for the entire comic is that you need to walk before you can run. So right now, I would say that your drawing fundamentals are still developing. And that's not to say that you're bad at drawing or anything like that, but I would say that that's the main thing that you should focus on first, because you have a huge amount of potential to grow into, and that's a good thing. But because of that, I think you need to stop thinking about advanced comic panel compositions and keep things simple, because not only will that make the comic better to read, in my opinion, it will also make it simultaneously easy on you to create. So it's a win-win. Because what's happening here is that you're having these really cool and interesting and challenging shot ideas, but your fundamentals aren't always there to support those ideas. And that's what creates the stiffness within the comic, and also some inconsistencies as well. For example, our main character's moustache disappears here. And also the comic feels empty. Despite the fact that you've got all of this action going on, there is an emptiness to it, where it just feels like it's sort of happening in an empty space. And that is entirely because there's nothing in the background apart from these speed lines. Now, don't worry, I have a plan for you. Like, if I was in your shoes, this is exactly what I'd do over the next 8 to 12 weeks. So before you start your comic, I want you to spend 30 minutes practicing just 2 things. The first are figure drawings, and the second are 3D shapes in perspective. I'd recommend learning through a YouTube channel like Toco, or maybe buy one of his courses, or if you can afford it, get an art mentor, and just spend 30 minutes practicing those 2 fundamentals before you start working on your comic. And then while you're working on your comic, focus on the fundamentals first before you get clever with it. So that means fewer dramatic camera angles where you've got harsh perspective, or you've got lots of things going on and sound effects sort of bleeding into each other and all that sort of stuff. Forget about that for most of your comic and keep your panels relatively simple, because having clear staging, which oftentimes this isn't, again, I don't know where they are, not much is happening in the background, and that really detracts from the story. That is much more important and impressive than lots of action shots and lots of bang, bang, crash, wallop. Now, I'm not suggesting that you make your comic boring. I'm not suggesting that you have every page be like 6 panels and those 6 panels are the same shape and size. I'm not suggesting that at all. I'm just saying that you should build the basic building blocks first, and then you can sort of get clever with it later. Like, put it this way, if you can make a boring comic page layout interesting, then when you get clever with it, it's going to really blow people's socks off. Using interesting or challenging camera perspective and camera angles is not going to hide your lack of fundamental skill, or your lack of experience, or your naivety. So don't lean on those things thinking that it's going to make your comic better, because oftentimes it actually makes your comic worse. Now, I have faith that you can pull this off because you already have the discipline to make this happen. And the fact that you've been able to make this happen shows that you're serious about making comics, which is really good to see. And so if you pair that discipline and that drive with consistency and structured fundamentals and a slightly simpler workflow, then over the next 8 to 12 weeks and beyond, the next comic you make is going to blow this one out of the water, which is why it's really important to keep this one as it is. Don't rework this one unless you already have, but try not to rework this one, because what you want to do is look at this one and then look at your next comic and compare the 2, because that's when you're really going to see how much you've improved. So that was Toco. The link to read Toco is in the description, so give that a read, and let's get on to the next comic. So the next comic we have is by Lin Lustig, and it's called Our Ship Must Sail. Now, I actually think that you have a huge advantage over a lot of new comic creators in that you have experience in the creative process that takes a long time. Because for everyone else who may not know, Lin is an established author. So she's got experience in a similar process to comics. I think writing and comics are very, very closely tied together, in my opinion. And that experience is going to help you more than drawing fundamentals will, because I think you're much less likely to give up. Now, that doesn't mean that we need to forget about drawing fundamentals and that they're not important. So I'm actually going to start with those. The thing that's going to help you the most is studying figure drawing. That's definitely going to help you. I mean, I'm sure you already do study figure drawing, but I would double down on that. And specifically what I would do is that the next time you work on your comic, spend 20 to 30 minutes before you start drawing, just doing gesture drawing and figure drawing, whether that's going on Pinterest or going on a website like Line of Action, and just warming up and loosening up. Because I think one of the things that you do, which is what many people do, including me, is that when you're drawing your character poses, you stiffen up quite a lot. And that often comes across in a lot of the panels. And in fact, there's one panel that I really want to focus on to illustrate this, because obviously the pages that I'm looking at now are quite old, so they don't necessarily represent where you are now. I think this panel here does, because one, it's a really good looking panel, but it also, there's two things that we can focus on that can improve every single panel that you do. So the first one is the stiffness. So if we look at this pose here and this pose here, it's clear what they're doing. You can see what they're doing, but they do appear to be quite stiff. And the reason why they feel quite stiff is because you're quite stiff when you're drawing them. And I think the reason why you're stiff while you're drawing them is because you don't want to get it wrong. And so because you're worried and your anxiety levels are going up, even if it's subconscious, you're stiffening up and you're tightening up. And that's what happens to so many people, including me. So one of the cures for this, other than experience, which obviously takes time, is to spend 20 to 30 minutes in your warm-ups just loosening up and just like practicing that flow and that gesture drawing and doing a challenging pose where the stakes are not high at all, and just sort of relaxing into it rather than thinking, I've got to get this done, I've got to get it right. So that alone, that sort of mindset shift, along with reps and doing it for a long time, will help loosen things up and help your panels become even more alive than they are. The second thing that I would consider adding to your arsenal is line weight variation. So if we take this panel as our example, in fact, I'm going to zoom in slightly. There we go. Now we can see that you've done a really good job of separating out this character to the background, because you've treated this like almost like a camera, where it looks like everything else is slightly out of focus, where she's much more in focus. And you can do that through putting more detail in her compared to people in the background. Obviously, we can see that they're in the background because they're smaller, so that all these little things add up to give that sense of depth. But one of the things that I would lean on a little bit more, and you do it already, is line thickness. So you've got the line thickness in the hair here, where it's following the direction of the light, because we can see the light is hitting her hair, or like the main source of light is hitting her hair. And we've got this almost cast shadow line here, but then there's nothing on the outside. And that's what I would do. So I would apply the same sort of level of line thickness to the outside of her body as well, because then that will help separate her from the background too. And it doesn't need to be like ridiculously thick. You can do that. That's a stylistic choice. That's totally fine. But just slightly thicker, especially if you compare, like if you look at this line here and look at the lines on the floor, like they are the same thickness. So they kind of bleed together a little bit. The main thing that's separating these elements are the colors and the values, but you can help get the line to help that along as well. So all three of those things can work in tandem. So that's the other thing that I'd really recommend, like loosening up and just relaxing into it and relaxing into the poses, and experimenting more with line variation. Those two things will upgrade every single panel that you do. Even if you did nothing else and just those two, everything else would be upgraded. And this is one of the things that I find interesting about your comic and about your submission, is that a lot of the things that you're worried about doing, like you're already doing it. And I think you're probably in the stage now where your journey and your process, I think it's just about refining what you're already doing rather than trying to look for new things to do. So I would just keep moving forwards, and what you'll notice, which is really frustrating, but it's encouraging at the same time, is that you'll get to a point where you'll start to see the drawings that you're doing feel like they're getting worse. They're not getting worse. It's just that you're getting better at looking for things and finding new things. And once that happens, that's when you'll see the big leaps in progress, which you may have already found. Now, usually this is the part of the video where I would say, you'd be a great candidate for my comic consistency system on Patreon, and this will be like a disguise advert. But honestly, I don't think you need it. I don't think you need it at all. I think your progress has been really fast already in terms of the page output, and that seems pretty consistent from what I've been able to see on Discord. So I think the main takeaway for you is to just keep going. It's to add those little things to loosen up, add a little bit of line variation, and have more confidence in your decision making. Like, I think your decision making is good. Obviously, there's a lot of room for improvement, but that goes for everybody making art all the time. There is no end game here. So just keep doing it. Keep going. Keep making pages, and try not to allow perfectionism to stall you. Take everything that you're learning from previous pages, apply it to new pages, and you'll see that your comic will improve just sort of naturally. So yeah, keep going. Now, Lin has a Patreon where you can see her comic, and for everyone else watching, you can find that in the link in the description. So thank you, Lin. Next comic. First of all, I would like to thank Tominomicon, because that is the funnest name that I've ever had to say on this channel. So thank you for that, Tominomicon. Tominomicon. Okay, I'll stop. Right, so Tominomicon. You're obviously an experienced artist, and you've completed about 160 pages of your comic, which is an insane amount. I almost swore there. So you don't have a motivation problem, clearly, because you've told me that you jump right back on a horse whenever you fall behind or fall off. So that's not an issue. But you did mention pacing and clarity when it comes to your comics. So let's look at that first. Now, this page that we've got here is from issue 5. And from the second page, I spotted something that can help with the pacing and clarity of your story. So obviously, you're not going to redraw any of this, what I'm about to say, but this is something that you can apply to all of your panels moving forwards. What I really want to focus on are these two middle panels here. And the reason why is because they have the most amount of information, and yet they are the smallest panels on the page by quite some distance. So these two panels are really, really dense. Now, this is the main reason why when your pages are in the thumbnail phase, that you figure out the word balloon placement like as accurate as you can there, because you would have spotted what I'm about to mention like early on, and it would have been a lot easier to fix and to change things. Now, again, I'm not suggesting you change these pages, because these pages are done, but this is something just to keep in mind moving forwards. So to give you an idea of what you can do differently to sort of lay this out is, first of all, identify why you might want to change the panels in the first place. Now, I've already mentioned the fact that the middle two panels, these two bad boys here, are quite dense, and there's a lot of information here. And I would argue that they need a little bit more breathing room compared to the top panel and the bottom panel. So in order to do that, we can decrease the size of the other panels. So for example, if we look at that top panel, it's got the close-up of the robot insect guy, the sort of praying mantis character. So we can crop it. So everything else in the panel is preserved, and we've also kept the web balloons exactly as they are, sort of very similar size. So we've got, let me draw on this. So this web balloon here is now here. This web balloon here is now here. We've got this sound effect here, which is now here. And we've got another sound effect here, which is here. And this web balloon, which is here. So everything has been translated across, same size, but we've cut the panel in half and everything has been preserved. And now we've got that much room for the middle two panels. So just by doing that, and it hasn't changed anything, it's a really easy fix, and we've more than doubled the amount of room that we've got in our middle two panels. Here's the other thing that I would recommend. It's not just about the additional space. It's about the different actions that your characters take within a panel. So broadly speaking, one panel equals one action. An action isn't necessarily a physical movement. It could be, it's anything that changes, anything that goes from one point to another point, right? From point A to point B. This panel here has 2 actions in it. And I would say action 1 is Orbo, which is this robot character here, looking at the scenery, looking at the environment and saying, fascinating. It's almost feeling distracted by what's going on. And then the second action is Joan elbowing him and him snapping out of his stupor. Looking and saying fascinating, that is number 1, and being elbowed and being distracted or being brought back into the room is number 2. Now, you can't do that here because you'd have to have even smaller panels where you've got panel 1 here and panel 2 here, and that's teeny tiny. However, because we've given ourselves more room, we can take this panel here and we can chop it in half. And now we've got 2 panels that are the same size as the original panel here. So here's how we can do that. We've got the first action here, which is Orbo looking off and saying fascinating. And then the second panel is Joan elbowing him, and maybe he's now looking this way or whatever, and he's snapped out of it. So we've got action 1 and action 2 in 2 different panels. And now we are left with this panel here, which is for this. So Orbo obviously is greeting our praying mantis character here. We can just about see that their hand is, you know, I am the optical repository of biological ontology, Orbo. But we don't get much of the body language there because most of him is being cropped out because we need more room for the word balloons, right? And do we need Joan in the background there? Maybe, maybe not. I would argue perhaps not. So we could do something like this. Now, literally the only change here is that we just get to see more of Orbo. We get to see him walking forwards. We get to see him expressing himself a bit more. And we have a lot more breathing room for the word balloons. And now that just leaves the bottom panel here. So the bottom panel doesn't really need to be changed, in my opinion. I think it's absolutely fine the way it is. Now, for this final panel, do you really need to change anything? No, I think it's fine as it is, to be fair. But I did get a little bit carried away, and I did start thinking about a different way that you could show this panel. So I just did a side-on shot. And the reason I did a side-on shot because I thought it'd be quite cool to have his little beam sort of cut through the panel. And like that's the edge of the page there. So got all this blue stuff here, and then the word balloon can sort of stick within that. I don't know. I just thought that was kind of cool. But yeah, that was just me having fun with it. Now, I'm not suggesting that my additions are better or worse or anything like that. All of this is just my opinion. And this part was relatively easy for me because you've already done all the hard work. So this is just the way that I see it. You don't have to agree with me. That part isn't important. The part that is important is that when you're laying out your pages, you need to think about why certain panels are certain sizes. And it's almost always the case that a big panel needs to be big because it needs to show a lot of information. And information, generally speaking, comes in 3 different flavors. So you've got character acting or body language, which is what we sort of see in this panel here. You've got environmental information to show the audience where the characters are. And you've already done that on the previous page, so you don't necessarily need to do that here. And you've got dialogue and sound effects. You've got the actual words, the speech. Now, if this page was a bit different and that top panel needed all of that room because there was more dialogue, or we needed to see the body language of the praying mantis character, or a new piece of information about the environment, then my assessment on the page changes and I'm left with 2 choices. I either keep everything else on the page the same and accept that although the layout isn't as effective as it could be, it's still fine. Or I take a panel or 2 and I put it on the next page. So maybe I take this bottom panel and I take it on to the next page because I need the room for on this particular page. Now, to be crystal clear, the page that you've done, this one here, is absolutely, there's nothing wrong with it. Like, it's not broken. It doesn't read badly or anything like that. Like, what I've suggested is just to take what works and make it, in my view, work even more. And that extends for the entire comic. I think this comic reads really well. I think you're a really interesting comic creator. I think you've got a really interesting story, and I think people will really enjoy reading it. So what I recommend that you do for your next page of this comic or another comic or whatever it is that you're currently working on is to thumbnail out an entire scene, whether that is 2 pages long or 10 pages long. And then once you've done that, walk away from it. Like literally walk away, go and do something else. Ideally come back to it the following day. Because what you want to do is give yourself that space, because if you're just looking at your comic all the time and you're just working on it all the time, you can't see the bigger picture and you just focus in on the details. And when you do that, you miss a lot of the fundamental things about pacing and clarity when it comes to the page layouts. Whereas if you step away and come back to it, you'll be able to spot those a lot easier. And the reason you want to do that in the thumbnail stage is because you don't want to have had to have done all the pencils and the inks and the colors and the letters, only to undo all of that because you've accidentally made a really dense panel or whatever. But when you're working on it, focus on the page layout first, the details second, and keep them as separate processes. So make sure that you've got enough space to draw in, and then focus on the drawings. So again, keep them separately. Once you've done this for a while and it becomes part of your process, you'll be able to do them both simultaneously. But for now, I think if you keep them separately, then it clears your headspace a lot more, and you can sort of focus on with more confidence. Because let's say that you've spent time figuring out that, okay, this panel layout gives me the most amount of space that I need to draw. Then you can focus a lot more confidently on the drawings. I hope that makes sense. And I think if you focus on that, then your comic will level up, definitely. Now, I want to thank all 3 of you guys, Clance, Lin, and Tominomicon. Thank you again for your name. The links for all 3 of these comics are in the description. I really hope you give them a go, add them to your reading list. And if you want to be featured in a future video, then join my Discord, which the link to is in my channel page on YouTube. And if you want to see other critiques I've given in the past, then watch this playlist.